What you're going to need for this project is a round object to trace. And I happen to have this bowl in my cupboard. It's a small soup or salad bowl. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it in the center of the paper, and then I'm going to hold it down with one hand, and with my pencil I'm going to lightly trace the edges of my bowl. There you go. Now you have a nice circle. It's always good to have a shape that you can work with. And what we're going to do is we're going to start drawing onto the paper. We're going to make a small scene, and we're going to start with some trees. We're going to start with two lines going out at an angle, and then we're going to take your line going in with a slight curve and go back out. Make that one a little bit longer as you proceed. You're going to take your line coming in on each side, small curve, and then continue out a little bit longer as you go towards the bottom of your circle. Okay. The tree now is in the foreground, so it's closest to us, and you can add some other trees right next to it. Same design. You're just going to start with two lines going out at an angle and coming in. The next line will be slightly longer and curving in. What you want to make sure you're doing is taking your tree to the bottom of your circle that you've drawn out. Then we're going to add perhaps another tree. You're going to start with two lines going out at an angle and curving in. And continue on down. You may have a tiny bit of overlapping, which means another tree will be in front of the tree that you're drawing. A slight overlap. Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to find the center of your circle and draw just a gentle line going across. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight from one side of your circle to the other. And then we're going to do a series of mountain ranges. And make sure that you draw lightly with your pencil. And as you can see, I have a couple of angle lines, and then I'm going to take that right down to the center line that's going across. And I'm going to build different heights of my lines. I'm going to take that a little bit higher. And it can have kind of a angled side to it, and take that right to the side of your pencil line, your circle. And then you can add another series of mountains going right across to the other side of your circle. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some shadows to my mountain. So I'm going to start to the far right. I'm going to go to the top point of this mountain, and I'm going to add kind of a soft curvy line going right down to that center line in my circle. I'm going to do that to my other mountain. Just kind of go right in between these two angle lines and take that right down to the center line and the mountain in the background. Now you can add as many mountains as you'd like to your drawing. So if you wanted to have just maybe one more in between the two mountains that I have on either side, you can just take a line going up at an angle, take that down. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight, and then take that off to touch the mountain on the right side. And then we're going to the highest point and adding a soft line. Now, what we're going to do is you're going to use a skinny black marker. It doesn't necessarily have to be this particular brand. I like using the Prismacolor, and I also like to use Sharpies, the permanent markers, and it has a very fine point. So let's use this Sharpie. So what I'm going to start to do now is I'm going to start tracing my pencil lines. And the thing I like about the permanent markers is that they don't smear. They retain their line even when they get wet, perhaps. I'm going to start outlining all my pencil lines with my marker. Okay, I'm going to start adding my definition. When you use a marker, the lines pop out. If you wanted to add any more trees to your foreground, that's fine. You could add perhaps a couple more trees off to the side, maybe just the tips of the trees. And then we're going to start tracing our mountain range. It makes a big difference when you trace them with your markers. And then the last mountain range here. All right. And lastly, don't forget to trace your outline. Take your time, don't rush. Take a deep breath. Almost there. There we go. Now, just go over any lines that didn't show up clearly. And what I recommend is using an eraser to erase any of the lines that are still showing. Clean it up a little bit. Now these outlines are called contour lines to our drawing. All right, and just brush that away. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding some shadows to that side part of the mountains with lines, okay? And I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to draw lines that are at an angle but close to each other. And what they do is when they're closer together, they create more of a shadow effect on your drawing. Make sure the line goes from one line to the other and they touch. You don't want the line to be floating. The closer you draw your lines to each other, the darker the shadow. So as you can see, now you start to see a little bit more of a shadow on the side of the mountain. Make sure that you do it all on the same side of your mountain range. And then we're going to draw another set of lines. A little bit of an angle. You don't need a ruler. Just take your time and draw them from top to bottom. And going all the way across, make sure it fills in the entire side of your mountain. Okay, and we're going to go over to this side, start from the top, and work your way down. and the last mountain range over here. Make sure that you go from one side to the other and that the lines are touching each other. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of a larger marker, still a fine point, so you can get a nice range of different size lines. And I'm going to color in with a thicker marker my trees, and I'm going to color them in solid black. And as you can see, it's a lot easier to fill that space in with a thicker marker. And the idea is to make sure that you color in all the little white spaces and fill in each tree. And just go from one side to the other. Get in all your little white spots. And your last tree. And there we go. Okay, we've got it pretty simple now. And for the background, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by making some dots. I'm going to start just over the mountains with some tiny dots. Now, if you don't press too hard with your marker, your dots will be rather small. And you can kind of just go right over the mountain range. Okay, and then you're going to continue another row of dots spaced apart from each other. Now the good thing about using Sharpie markers is if you decided to perhaps paint this after you were done, or just leave it black and white, but if you wanted to paint it, the Sharpie marker will not bleed because it's a permanent marker. If you used a different kind of marker, like a flare, marker, then chances are it will start to bleed. You can see you have a nice range of darks and lights, and now I'm going to start to add a little bit of a bigger dot going across. Again, spacing my dots apart, filling up the area. Take your time. If you rush, your artwork can get a little bit messy, so I suggest you just take your time, maybe take a break, come back to it, and then I'm going to start adding a slightly larger dot just above the medium dots. So you see you have a nice kind of range of value, and we'll get into that later with your marker. And we can go into having bigger dots. And maybe filling this in more. Now you could leave this empty, or you can add some lines to fill in your ground. I'm just going to add a little bit more here and fill that up. If you wanted to go in on the side, make sure that you have some larger dots on the side. You could add them right along your circle. There we go. Now you can leave it as is, or you can go back in, and if you wanted to add some lines, some shorter dash lines going across to kind of follow that horizontal line in the center, you could do that too. It's just whether you want to add some more detail to it or not. And it's a good thing to use a smaller template, like a bowl, a small bowl, to fit onto your paper. If you're doing a lot of detail, that helps with the size. And I'll show you some other examples using lines that you can create and get even more detailed in your artwork. Don't forget in between the trees, all the way down to the bottom of your circle. And these have kind of a little wiggle to them. They're not perfectly straight. And I'm going all the way down to the bottom of my paper. Okay. I'm just gonna go up here, add a little bit more to my dots. So I have a nice range of small, medium, and large. And then maybe get some tinier ones, not pressing too hard with my marker, kind of inserting and filling up my sky. There we go. And there you have it. So it's a fun exploration of using lines. I just want to show you some other drawings that I've done. So you can take this to different levels. You can create a square template, and if you wanted to add a house with some smaller trees, some more trees in the foreground, of course some mountains, some clouds, I added some birds, and perhaps a sun. So there are lots of ideas that you can use in your drawing. And then to get even more detailed with your mountain range, as you can see, I have many kind of different points overlapping each other. And then the lines that are closer together create a darker shadow. When the lines are spaced further apart, they make it much lighter. So you have a nice contrast. And that is the end of our first class. Thank you very much, and I will see you next week.